Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're tackling a challenge that, let's be honest, has probably caused a few sleepless nights and maybe some stress-induced coffee runs for a lot of you educators and administrators out there. We're talking about the dual implementation of the IB curriculum right alongside the Next Generation Science Standards, or NGSS. But don't worry, our goal here is to demystify this whole alignment process and actually prove how these two heavy-hitting frameworks can work beautifully together to really elevate your students' scientific understanding. So here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll start with the dual implementation challenge, move into three-dimensional science learning, touch on the IB inquiry philosophy, map out some concepts and practices, and then wrap up with how this actually looks in PYP and MYP classrooms. Let's kick things off with a pretty powerful question. How do we teach minds to be well-informed rather than well-stuffed? You might recognize that from Alec Peterson, the very first Director General of the IB. It's a great quote because it perfectly establishes a fundamental truth for both IB and NGSS. Science education isn't about memorizing a bunch of isolated facts, right? It's about exploring authentic phenomena and truly developing the powers of the mind.
Which brings us to Section 1, the Dual Implementation Challenge, and aligning two powerful frameworks.
Look, it is incredibly stressful to juggle a brand new set of standards when you're already running the rigorous IB curriculum. It can totally feel like you're being pulled in opposite directions, stretching your time to the absolute limit. But here's the massive relief. The NGSS doesn't disrupt your IB methodology. Actually, it just refocuses the end goal onto student engagement with real-world scientific phenomena. The NGSS gives us these concrete performance expectations that bring us a giant step closer to realizing the IB's core vision through measurable, practical outcomes. What we're really looking at here is a massive paradigm shift. We're moving away from traditional two-dimensional science, having students blindly memorize the linear steps of photosynthesis, for example. Instead, we're stepping into the shared realm of NGSS and IB science, which is three-dimensional learning. This is where students actually apply concepts to explain phenomena, like tracing exactly how energy physically flows and transforms throughout a living ecosystem. Moving right along to Section 2, three-dimensional science learning, and unpacking the NGSS mechanics. So what exactly is three-dimensional learning? Well, it's the integration of content knowledge, cross-cutting concepts, and the practices needed to engage in scientific inquiry and engineering design. The National Research Council's vision is crystal clear on this. Students absolutely must intertwine their knowledge and their practice to truly make sense of the world. We want to avoid any kind of unauthentic mimicry of real science and instead have students genuinely doing the science themselves.
And these three dimensions have to operate simultaneously. First up, you have science and engineering practices, basically what scientists actually do. Second, cross-cutting concepts, how scientists think across different domains. And third, disciplinary core ideas, what scientists know. If you leave even one of these out, well, science learning instantly collapses right back into the rote memorization we're trying to avoid.
Let's transition to Section 3, the IB inquiry philosophy, which acts as the structural counterpart. I absolutely love this quote from Claude Lévi-Strauss. The scientific mind does not so much provide the right answers as asks the right questions. This is just the perfect conceptual bridge connecting those NGSS practices we just talked about with the core IB philosophy of sustained inquiry. Both of these frameworks fundamentally value curiosity, critical thinking, and the idea that learning is an active, open-ended process. To actually get there, we rely on Erikson's structure of knowledge. It's essentially a journey that transitions from foundational, factual data at the very bottom all the way up to deep conceptual understanding at the top. This represents the necessary evolution from fact-based to idea-centered teaching, and you'll notice this aligns perfectly with what the NGSS demands in its performance expectations, using facts as stepping stones to build and grasp those larger, cross-cutting concepts.
Okay, Section 4, Mapping Concepts and Practices, where we find the powerful synergy between the two.
Now here is where the magic really happens for you educators. Look at how flawlessly the IB Primary Years Program key concepts map to NGSS cross-cutting concepts. Teaching form in IB? Guess what? You're already teaching structure and function in NGSS. Causation maps directly to cause and effect. Change translates to stability and change. Recognizing this translation instantly lowers the barrier to entry. You're literally already speaking the exact same pedagogical language, just using slightly different vocabulary. And this parallel structure extends to the broader categories too. The 4 PYP science strands, living things, earth and space, materials and matter, and force and energy, they function exactly like the overarching NGSS disciplines: life science, earth and space science, and physical science. They fit together like a hand in a glove, which makes your job infinitely easier when you're sitting down to align your units.
This synergy is such a massive relief because it completely removes that heavy burden of creating vertical curriculum alignments from scratch. Since the NGSS already expertly scaffolds these concepts from kindergarten all the way up to grade 12, you can finally stop worrying about being coverage-centered. Instead, you get to focus entirely on being deeply idea-centered. The NGSS provides the rigorous expectations, and IB provides the trusted, inquiry-based vehicle to actually get your students there.
Let's wrap up with Section 5, PYP and MYP classrooms, looking at specific applications and challenges.
When we step onto the floor of a middle years program classroom, we find a framework that effortlessly houses the NGSS. Because the MYP inherently demands interdisciplinary understanding, your students are already evaluating science applications in real-life contexts. They're fostering independent and collaborative investigation naturally. And even better, MYP's criteria-based assessments demand that students prove their understanding through actual application, not just by filling in bubbles on a multiple-choice test.
But, we also have to honestly acknowledge the main hurdle we face here, particularly in the primary years program. The NGSS formally introduces engineering design practices as a core discipline for K through 5. And incorporating this into the PYP without overloading teachers or rushing those deeply valuable, naturally flowing units of inquiry, well, it's a genuine challenge. It requires careful planning, dedicated time, and some highly focused professional development.
I want to leave you with a final provocative thought today. If science is constantly evolving, how will your classroom evolve to meet it? Whether you look through the lens of IB or NGSS, empowering your students with a critical, inquiring, scientific worldview is the ultimate shared goal. By embracing the synergy between these two incredible frameworks, you're not just adopting new standards, you're actively evolving your classroom to better prepare young minds for an incredibly complex future. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.